Hello, 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 everybody! Unlucky Tug here, and I'm very happy to be presenting you with the review I've been wanting to make since September. This is the ultra epic, uber amazing mega thoughts on Season 20 Special Edition. Season 20. Where do I even start? What can I possibly say about Season 20 of Thomas and Friends? Well, a lot of things. First off, I need to tell you all that this is actually my second recording of this review. I recorded myself reading the entire script I wrote up, and I was almost done editing the audio for this 45-minute review when stupid me accidentally deleted the folder containing the MP3 file. By the time I realized I had deleted it, I had already emptied my trash and it was gone forever. So I had no choice but to go back and re-record this whole friggin' thing. Ugh, lucky me. Can't wait to re-edit all the audio again! Second, this video is not going to be like your usual Unlucky Tug Thoughts On format, where I just go through the movie or episodes in order, like I did in those god-awful Season 14 and 15 review videos I did way back in the day. Don't watch those videos, they are friggin' awful. We're instead going to break this review up into numbered sections, as if we're reading a chapter book. Each section will be about a different topic of Season 20 that I feel is worth discussing. This is going to be an extremely long video, maybe the longest I've ever made. I know I said before that after the Great Race review I wouldn't put myself through a project this big ever again, but gosh darn it, Season 20 is worth it. So grab some popcorn, grab a soda, sit back, and let's jump into the 20th season of Thomas and Friends. Number 1. General response. I friggin' loved Season 20. This was easily the best season in the animated series. It trumps everything from the past decade and then some. It was so good that it competes with the classic seasons for best season ever. It truly does. I mean, before this, I thought Season 18 was an extremely great season. The best we'd had at the time. Then we got Season 19, and don't get me wrong, Season 19 was a very good season, but the corporate voices behind the scenes were somewhat transparent in it. We need Thomas in every episode. We need more episodes about the main characters. We can't have this many episodes focused on obscure side characters that don't sell as well, etc. The voices of the big suits at Mattel were somewhat obvious, and you could tell they had to adjust the season as so. Afterwards, I kinda just figured this was the way Thomas was going to be from now on. I didn't necessarily have a problem with that really, but I would never have expected a season so crazy and amazing like Season 20 to follow it. Needless to say, it blew my expectations out of the water and sky high. So many elements of this season took me by surprise, from the very first episode to the last. It was nothing but a string of endless, delightful surprises. They had me by the balls, just craving more and more of this content. Even the weakest episodes of Season 20 were still really good. The weakest episode, in my opinion, was Sydney Sings. Just as an episode, it was pretty meh. It was a very obvious copy and paste, run-of-the-mill, 3 strikes formula episode, but even then I was able to enjoy it so much because it brought forward an obscure, nothing background character like Sydney into the spotlight. And that just encaptures the celebratory spirit of Season 20 in general. There's not many negatives to discuss with this season. However, there was one glaring problem with it that irritated me to no end. Number 2. The show's distribution is terrible. The only real problem with Season 20 is that we got it way too late. These episodes follow Lost Treasure very closely, and getting them over a year since the movie, with a completely unrelated movie in between, did not work towards its advantage. There is obviously a disconnect between who produces the episodes, who distributes the episodes, and who makes the toys, because none of the three seem to correlate in any way, and it's very frustrating. The biggest highlight of Season 20 was that it devoted so much time to obscure side characters in the leads, most of which appeared in last year's movies, like Ryan, Skiff, Donald and Douglas, Glenn, etc. When you have such a huge gap of time between these characters' appearances, and mega marketing for a completely different one in between, it's very easy for kids, you know, the main target demographic, to forget who the characters are. The Amazon reviews for the Season 20 DVDs are just astounding and very eye-opening. Parents complain that their kids become disinterested because they have no idea who the characters are they are watching. Now, if we had gotten season 20 following Lost Treasure as we were supposed to, perhaps this wouldn't be such an issue. Kids might know who Daisy or Donald and Douglas or the Coffee Pot Engine are if there wasn't such a huge, gigantic gap between their debuts and their episodes. It's obvious that the people behind the scenes at Hit and Mattel who distribute these episodes don't understand this. To them it's just a kid show, who cares when the episodes get out? As long as we continue to make our money off them and the merchandise tie-ins, we don't give a damn. No one else seems to win in this situation. Fans don't win because they get the episodes they want to see so late. Kids don't win because they become disinterested because they have no idea who the featured characters are. And parents don't win because their kids are unhappy with the product they just spent money on. When you have episodes that are very much tied in with a particular Thomas movie, it's best those episodes come out following that movie, don't you think? Not over a year after. I will say though, if there is any positives to the season coming out so late, it's that after the disappointing corporate mandated marketing stunt that was The Great Race, season 20 was really what fans needed to reassure them that Thomas was still in really good hands. I'll happily say that season 20 makes up for The Great Race and then some. And even then, we can just ignore The Great Race, thankfully. Nothing from it is going to carry over to the show, so we can just forget about it in time. After season 20 ends, they're going to cut straight to Journey Beyond Sodor, and season 21 will follow that. The Journey Beyond Sodor characters are slated to appear in season 21, so hopefully this will set things right and we'll be back on track to a proper correlated release schedule. So just to clarify, here's the official timeline. The adventure begins, Season 19, Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, Season 20, The Great Race, Journey Beyond Sodor, Season 21. This all just begs the question, what was the point of The Great Race, other than the obvious? Why didn't they just hold Lost Treasure over until this year, and have The Adventure Begins be the 2015 movie in honor of the 70th anniversary? Or maybe not have Season 19 take place before Lost Treasure? I would just love to be a fly on the wall during board meetings at Mattel, and hear what the deciding factor is for all this nonsense. Spoiler alert! It's money! Number 3. Pushing up Daisy. Now we'll start to get into the specifics of Season 20. I can't in good conscience talk about this season without mentioning Daisy. Daisy the Diesel Railcar's usage in Season 20 was one of the biggest surprises ever. We knew they were going to do something with her after she returned in Lost Treasure. This hinted that we would probably see an episode about her and Ryan working together on their branch line. I expected one episode about that, and that'd probably be it. Not only did we get one episode about just that, we got 3. 3 episodes with Daisy as a lead, and a 4th featuring her having a gnarly crash. I never ever expected to see so much of Daisy in one season. She had more appearances and screen time in this one season than she's had in the entirety of the series prior to this. What I love about Daisy and CGI is that you can tell the writers, and when I say writers, I mean Davey Moore, since he wrote every episode Daisy appeared in, were having a lot of fun with this character. They used every element of this character they could and took full advantage of it. To help clarify my point, I'll give you a list. Being generally snooty and having a high opinion of herself.
Look at me, she purred to the passengers. I'm the latest diesel, highly sprung and right up to date. You won't want Thomas's bumpy old Annie and Clarabelle now.
I'm highly sprung, you see. Tip-top and thoroughly modern.
Using her fitter as an excuse to get out of work.
My fitter's a very nice man. He comes every week and examines me carefully. Daisy, he says, never pull. You're highly sprung, and pulling is bad for your swerves.
I can't pull a mail car. It's fitter's orders.
A general dislike for pulling cars.
Do they expect me to pull that? I won't. Percy can do it. He loves messing about with freight cars.
Daisy doesn't like pulling cars. She likes to do just what work she chooses. And no more.
A never-ending history of trouble with bulls and cows on the line.
Champion sniffed at Daisy. "Ugh," said Daisy. And that was that. Daisy did no more.
taking advantage of previously established relationships with other characters.
This is better, said Daisy, but whatever is that rubbish? We won't stay here to be insulted, they fumed.
I can go anywhere I like, but you have to wait for an engine to come along. So old-fashioned and out of date. And Liverpool coaches. That's just rude.
That last one was what hit me the most. The whole episode, The Railcar and the Coaches, is based off a single one-off line where Daisy is rude to Annie and Clarabelle in her debut story. They explored this whole potential dynamic between them and wrote a stellar episode out of it. And what's even better is later on in the way she does it, when Daisy's bragging, they keep that continuity and you see Annie and Clarabelle rolling their eyes at her. Not everyone on Sodor gets along, and I love that. Not everyone is happy and chipper with each other, just like real life. It's this attention to the little details like that that really make this a rich show. Daisy is one of the most fleshed out characters we've had in the animated series. We saw a lot of sides of her here, and she's proven to be able to carry an episode as the lead. They did it 3 times this season, and each time was great. Despite Daisy being such a fun, layered character, I don't really see her being used all that much following season 20. I know that they used her so heavily here because this was her returning season, but I do wonder what they plan on doing with her later on. She's obviously not a character Mattel wants to push, hence the severe lack of merchandise for her. So if anything, I just see her being used maybe once or twice a season as a side character. If we're lucky, they may use her as a lead again, but we'll just have to wait and see about that. I really want to see Daisy again. Of all the returnee characters they've brought back over the past couple years, Daisy is definitely the one I think they handled the best and is easily my favorite. And speaking of returnees, number 4, fan service done right. Oh no! Unlucky Tug is going to start talking about fan service! I can hear the rage of you all typing comments on your keyboards now, but hold off. Let me say what I have to say. Let's not beat around the bush here. Season 20 was a very fan service heavy season, more so than any other season before it. Now you all know my thoughts on fan service and how it can be a negative thing if not handled right. Before I go any further, I just want to clarify what fan service is. Fan service is when a franchise panders to its hardcore fans, like throwing in references, imagery, or characters that only the hardcore fans will understand and appreciate. For example, only fans will appreciate the mention of the coffee pot engines in The Adventure Begins, because that is a very obscure reference. Passers-by and people who just generally watch Thomas will not understand the intention or the relevance of that mention and would just find it unusual. Fan service is not a bad thing. It can be a really great thing if done right. And when I say done right, I mean when they don't pathetically pander to the hardcore fans to ensure they keep watching and buying the products. And that's where my problem with it stems from. It's the equivalent of using a shiny object to hold the attention of a cat. Yes, I just compared Thomas fans to a cat. Deal with it. Let's look back at season 18, where 2 token fan service characters, Duck and Oliver, were used pretty often. They both had episodes that featured them as leads, and I don't really have a problem with those. It's episodes such as Last Train for Christmas or Spencer's VIP where they appear for no discernible reason. In Spencer's VIP, both of them appear on screen for about a minute, add nothing to the story, and never appear and or mentioned again. It feels tacked on. They feel very shoehorned, and they're only there to give the hardcore fans boners. To me, that's pathetic. And a little insulting. It's so transparent to me why they're there, and what's even worse is that the fans were just eating it up, as if their appearance was the only reason they liked that episode. The Sharon Miller era sucked and the fans hate the show now. How do we get them to like it again? Oh, how about we bring back all these old characters and throw them in half the episodes? That'll make the fans watch again. Why do you think Duck was the first character they brought back in the first Mattel-owned season?
Technically Jack was the first character they brought back since he was in King of the Railway, and that comes before season 17, so...
Hey, get out of here. I'm trying to make a point. Blatant pandering fan service is the easiest way to get fans to watch and buy your franchise again. And after the disastrous Sharon Miller era, making sure the fans watched again was necessary. But I feel it could have been handled a bit more tastefully, at least in season 18. I'm happy to say that my big problems with fan service in the series really only apply to that season and that season only. Season 19 seemed to back away from all that, and very little heavy fan service elements were present. Yeah, some references and nods here and there, but nothing too jarring, out of place, or shoehorned. Nothing worth getting upset about. They were nice, if anything. And that's the funny thing with fan service. It's a double-ended sword. It comes from a good place, but it is a risk. If there's not enough of it, people complain and say the product is boring, and look away, i.e. Season 19. And if there's too much, people still complain and say it's pandering, i.e. Season 18. In order for it to work, you have to find the right balance. And I'm really happy to say that Season 20 has found that perfect balance of incorporating fan service into the show without it feeling too heavy-handed. The writers want to get fans excited by using characters they want to see, and by all means, they should do it. As long as they are used as characters and not tools, I'm as happy as a clam. The trick is just to use the fan service characters as characters. Use them in stories, make them feel like they're supposed to be there. Don't just throw them in, work them in. Prior to Season 20, I didn't feel they were really doing that, with a few exceptions. I'm very happy to say that I thought Duck and Oliver in particular were handled wonderfully in Season 20. There were only 2 episodes they played somewhat big parts in, and that's all they really needed. Blown Away and Skiff and the Mermaid were episodes about Skiff, and Duck and Oliver were the supporting cast, which is where they shine the best in my opinion. It made sense they'd appear since the episodes took place on their branch line. You wouldn't believe how happy I was that the writers had the restraint to not have Duck mention he is Great Western or his real name is Montague once. I admire that restraint, and I'm glad to see them moving forward from that. Like I said, as long as they are used as part of the story and actually add something to it, I have no complaints. Donald and Douglas were the other token characters I was a bit worried about. After seeing how they handled them in Lost Treasure, I was afraid that this was just what they were going to do with them. Use them as cameo characters and shoehorn them in wherever. And I'll be honest, I am shocked that Donald and Douglas only appeared in 1 episode this season. And holy crap, what a good episode that was. Love Me Tender was a very heartwarming episode that was actually about Donald and Douglas. The story was focused on them and their relationship with each other. For example, Duck and the Slip Coaches, which everyone loved because it was an episode with Duck as a lead, was way more about James than it was Duck. In fact, all of Duck and Oliver's major appearances since their comebacks featured another character as the lead, and I'm sure this is because the writers are aware they are not able to carry an episode on their own. Love Me Tender breaks that trend and brought the characters we wanted to see forward into the spotlight and used them just the appropriate amount. This was Donald and Douglas's only major appearance this season, and granted, that's really all they needed. They didn't feel forced at all whatsoever. Other returning characters include Daisy, which we already talked about, Trevor, who barely did anything and somehow got a load of new merchandise, someone try to explain that one, and the Pack. Now, I'm not sure how many fans really wanted to see the Pack again. I believe I'm in the minority when I say I love the Pack and I think they're a really cool concept. They also appeared in only 1 episode this season, and I think that was just the right amount. Mucking About was a really fun episode that summarized the Pack characters' relationship with each other pretty well, specifically with how they deal with Max and Monty. If they continue to only do 1 Pack-centric episode a season, I am A-okay with that. In all, the fan service characters were used wonderfully in Season 20, and it gives me hope that they will continue to do so, and hopefully weave them into the show so well that I can one day stop calling them fan service characters and just characters. But I just don't think we are at that point yet, though it feels like we are close. We'll see what happens in Season 21. Number 5. New faces, new places. As well as utilizing a plethora of older characters, Season 20 is also exclusive for giving screen time to so many new characters. And by new characters, I don't just mean Hugo and Bradford, I mean Ryan, Skiff, Glenn, Judy and Jerome, and the Smallies. This was all of their first appearances in the show, not a special or a movie, just the regular, episodic TV show. The fact some of these characters even appeared at all in the regular series is nothing short of mind-blowing. I don't want to get nitty-gritty and talk in-depth about each new face specifically, but there are a few things I would like to say about each one. Hugo was the season's token newbie, and was really the only one I didn't find much to scream about. I was excited to see his episodes, and was left disappointed. When the character's only defining personality trait is his propeller, you really don't have much material to work with, and his episodes reflect that. He is very much a concept that Mattel came up with. I mean, come on. Thomas, Percy, James, and Philip all go visit the gimmicky new character in his debut episode? Really? Come on. Doesn't mean I think he's god-awful, but should Hugo just, never appear again in the show? I mean, I wouldn't complain. Bradford was fun. He obviously wasn't created for toys or anything. He comes off more as a part of a fun episode idea the writers came up with, and they just rolled with it. I love that, and I would like to see more of this kind of experimentation in the show. Not every new character needs a several episode arc and loads of merchandise to be effective. Now, Ryan is one of those characters that just fits into the show so perfectly. He feels so right in this universe. He looks like a Thomas character, he acts like a Thomas character, it feels like he could have always been there. And at the same time, he's a very different kind of Thomas character. I said before that Ryan's personality in Lost Treasure was somewhat vanilla, and wasn't used to his full potential there. So it's nice to see him more fleshed out in his episodes. Ryan is a pushover. He's extremely goodwill but has a problem saying no. As a person who also has a problem with saying no, I see Ryan as rather relatable and a good role model for the kids watching. The fact they paired up this pushover character with the confident, excuse-making character of Daisy excites me and leaves me craving more of their on-screen dynamic together. Skiff was also a lot of fun to see again. When I first saw Skiff in the trailer for Lost Treasure, I thought he looked really stupid and was just an overall dumb idea. I mean, a sailboat on rails? Really? Never did I expect this friggin' sailboat to turn out to be the most developed new character in that movie. I was delighted to see Skiff return and also really enjoyed his episodes. He is an incredibly endearing little guy. I love how they used him as a visual gag throughout the season. Just the mere sight of him is worth chuckling at. I sincerely hope they continue to use him in the future, and don't just forget about him. Judy and Jerome returning was a big surprise, as was Glyn the coffee pot engine. I enjoyed what they did with the cranes and thought the super meta nods to them literally being replaced by Rocky were extremely clever, but I am weary of what this means for the future. Now there's 3 breakdown crane characters. That's a little excessive, and I'm not exactly sure how they're going to handle that. An episode in the future where Judy and Jerome actually converse with Rocky would be kind of fun. We'll see what happens. Glyn, however, I was ecstatic about. I did a whole video on his episodes already, so you know how I feel about him. When I first heard that Glyn would be coming back this season, I lost my shit. I never, ever thought they'd consider using that character again and be the focus of 2 whole episodes. Season 20, for some reason, had 28 episodes. 2 more than usual. Can we just skip the Hugo ones, pretend Glyn was the season's token newbie, and call it an even 26? Yeah? Okay, good. I'll be perfectly honest, the Glyn episodes were the ones I was looking forward to the most out of everything we had coming in Season 20. And only second to them were none other than the ones featuring the Smallies. Number 6. Big things come in small packages. Initially, I wanted to talk about the small railway engines in the new faces section of this video. But who am I kidding? There's too much to talk about with these little guys, and their mere presence alone in the show is worth dividing an entire section to. Legend of the Lost Treasure presented us with a huge step for the franchise, and that was introducing exclusively Railway Series characters into the animated series. The first time we've seen a new Audrey character in over 2 decades. For those unfamiliar with what the Railway Series is, the Railway Series is the book series that Thomas and Friends is based on. Most of Audrey's 26 books were adapted for the show in the first few seasons, and after season 4, the show started to write its own original stories rather than using the source material as a basis. Sadly, some of Audrey's books were skipped over, and for fair reasons. Small Railway Engines featured the introduction of the miniature engines Rex, Mike, and Bert. In reality, we all know they never adapted Small Railway Engines for TV, because making functioning scale props of miniature engines would be damn impossible. I mean, the crew members had a hard enough time filming with the cumbersome narrow gauge engines in season 4, so much that they felt the need to build brand new, bigger ones for the very next season. Imagine working with props even smaller than those. However, times have changed a lot since then. Thomas is now animated. Anything is possible now. There is no limit to what they can do. And after years of yearning for them, Mattel, Hit, and Andrew Brenner finally heard us and brought the miniature engines into the show. Not only did they just bring Railway Series characters and locations into the show, they adapted the book stories into episodes too. Tit for Tat was the first Railway series story on the screen since Mind That Bike, which aired in 1995, 16 seasons ago! This was a real landmark in Thomas's history. Seeing them so faithfully retell these stories and use so much of the book's dialogue was totally surreal to witness, especially coming from the animated mouths of the CGI show. Of course, they took some liberties with the adaptations, such as working in other elements to fill up time, changing some of the dialogue, and ensuring Thomas appeared in some way. We'll talk about that in a minute. But none of these changes were enough to ruin the stories. I see a lot of people complain about the changes, and I just don't get it. This is nothing new. Even in the early seasons, they changed up the dialogue and moved things around. These are adaptations, not 100% complete retelling of the original stories. If you're just going to completely recreate the original with no style or flair, then what is the point? This is not the Railway series, this is Thomas and Friends. Can we please stop endlessly comparing the two? I was very accepting of all the changes they made for The Adventure Begins, and that still to this day is my favorite Thomas movie. My thoughts toward the Smollys episodes are very similar. They are faithful to the originals, but at the same time are their own thing entirely. I'll tell you right now, some of the biggest surprises in the Smollys episodes were the human characters. I was not expecting them to render a small controller for this, let alone mention his name is Mr. Fergus Duncan. Something even the original book never did. I half expected Mr. Percival or even Sir Topham Hatt to be their controller. But like I said, the show is animated now. Anything is possible. I was really shocked they used Willie the Farmer and referred to him by name, and I was blown away by the use of Audrey and Teddy Boston as the visitors. The fact they actually rendered a Teddy Boston just to stay accurate with the original story is totally amazing to me, even though the render doesn't really look like him. Though that is nitpicking, and I'd rather stray away from that. The fact he exists at all is worth celebrating. Rex, Bert, and Mike are really fun, fleshed out characters. Their personalities are very distinct from each other, and there is plenty of story potential to grab at with them. Whether or not Mattel approves use for them in season 21 onwards is beyond me, but I really hope this is not the last time we'll see them. Even though they only appeared in 3 episodes total this season, they certainly managed to pack a punch and stand above the rest. You know what they say, never overlook a little engine. Number 7. Too much Thomas?
Too much Thomas. Too much Thomas. We want him gone. He appears too much.
Zio? What are you doing?
Protesting Mattel's senseless ambition to shoehorn Thomas into every episode of season 20. He's not necessary. He shouldn't be there.
You've been spending too much time on Twitter, haven't you?
Yes.
The biggest criticism I've seen endlessly about season 20 is that Thomas appears in every episode. This has been a big controversy for a long time, and I'm not sure I get it. Personally, I could care less. I really could. It's not that big of a deal. At this point, it should be a given. Of course, Thomas is going to appear in every episode in some way. I went into the Small Railway Engines episodes expecting to see him worked in, and his appearance in them didn't deviate from the episodes whatsoever. Some say his appearance ruined the episodes for them, and to that I say, are you idiots? Really? Thomas's 2-second appearances ruined these landmark episodes for you? What on earth do you think the show's writers owe you? I understand constructive criticism and everyone has a right to voice their opinion, but this is just a senseless battle that no one will ever win. This is obviously something the writers have no control over. I feel at this point, 20 seasons in, Thomas appearing in every episode shouldn't be something we even think about. The fact people complain about it still is incredibly tiresome and a waste of energy. Thomas is the main character of the show. His appearance is important. His name is in the frickin' title. The show is called Thomas and Friends, not Friends. I stated earlier in this video that I prefer it when characters are used as characters, not as tools. And I'll probably sound like a hypocrite when I say this, but Thomas is the biggest tool of them all. Interpret that however you wish. Either interpretation would be correct. While what I said before makes sense in context to side characters, Thomas is a different beast entirely, and comparing him to the likes of a side character like Duck or Oliver or whoever is a pretty unfair comparison. The reasons for each existing at all in the show are different entirely. I can excuse Thomas's appearances because he is the main character. A lot of people say Thomas doesn't need to be there because he wasn't the main character in the books, and there were long periods of time where Thomas just didn't appear at all. And yeah, while that's true, books and TV are completely different from each other. They are very different viewing experiences. You need a main character on a television series, someone the intended audience can relate to, and Thomas is just that. Like I said before, the Railway series and the TV show are two different entities. Stop comparing them! It's also completely obvious that this is a corporate mandated thing from Mattel. Mattel's focus groups probably said, "We need more Thomas, we need more Thomas in these episodes. My kids didn't like these episodes because they didn't recognize anyone." Especially in a season where lots of episodes are focused on obscure side characters that kids of the general public are not familiar with whatsoever, Thomas's presence becomes even more necessary. With him there, it's more apparent to kids that these are all Thomas characters in the Thomas universe. Because Thomas has to appear in every episode, I actually think the way they went about using him this season was pretty clever. I actually applaud the showrunners for having some restraint and not having him speak in every episode. There's a number of episodes this season in which Thomas appears on screen for only one shot, and never talks, nor is mentioned, meaning he was probably not present whatsoever in the scripts. Thomas's presence in the Small Railway Engines episodes was very clever. Tit for Tat was the only of the three in which Thomas's appearance was somewhat jarring to me, because we are introduced to the Smallies, then get about a minute and a half completely separate of them with Thomas, and then it cuts right back to them and Thomas is never seen or mentioned again. The whole bit with him could so easily just be cut out from that episode and we could start right at the shed scene after it. He's more worked into the other two and his presence feels a bit more natural than in Tit for Tat. Feel free to disagree with me on that, but that's just my opinion. But even then, I applaud it because they worked in a scene where the Reverend W. Audrey and Thomas the Tank Engine talk to each other. I see you, Brenner, you cheeky clever man, you. In conclusion, Thomas is going to appear in every episode from now on, and we should just get used to it and expect it. As long as he's worked in somewhat cleverly and his appearance in said episode makes sense, I see no reason to complain whatsoever. If him appearing in every episode is what it takes to get super fun, crazy stories based on a variety of different characters, then so be it. Number 8. I love Andrew Brenner and I want to give him a hug. Andrew Brenner is the savior of the Thomas and Friends franchise. He truly is. The show has had an extremely speckled history. It started out strong and the response was overwhelmingly positive. The stories were simple, the characters were relatable, the universe felt real. The direction and detailed props and music all assisted in making the show even grander than it was, and it remained successful for many, many years. Then came along Thomas and the Tragic Railroad, and the franchise began its never-ending nosedive from there. After that nonsensical, ridiculous, god-awful movie, the general public viewed Thomas as a joke. People saw it as just another dumb kid show. It was apparent in the seasons following the movie that there was a dip in quality and the showrunners were losing steam, no pun intended. Then Hit Entertainment bought the franchise, and within a year into the purchase, the show was absolutely broken. It had been reduced to an educational baby show, and completely lost the spirit of what made the original Thomas season so great. There were good episodes here and there, but it was just an overall disappointment. Things only got worse when the show went fully animated, and even less of a fug was given. So much to the point where even die-hard fans couldn't get through an episode before turning it off. Things were dour. But then, in 2012, Mattel bought Hit Entertainment and Thomas received a new home. Mattel saw potential in the show and knew it was broken. The first thing they did was bring in a new head writer named Andrew Brenner, as well as a new producer named Ian McHugh, and a whole new team of show writers, animators, and even a new narrator. 2013 saw the airing of the first Mattel-owned season, Season 17. Season 17 was the show's return to form, with stories once again held up by the strength of the characters and their dialogue. Season 17 was not perfect by any means, but things have only gotten better since. And here we are now at Season 20, arguably one of the best seasons of the show ever. This I will always be grateful to Mattel for. Mattel realized there was a problem with the show and took the initiative to fix it. If it weren't for Mattel, there would be no Andrew Brenner. No matter how much they've screwed up the toys or how obnoxious their marketing stunts are, Mattel took the correct steps in initiating the amendment of our show and we shouldn't forget that. Mattel may have initiated the fix, but the real credit goes to Andrew Brenner and his writing team. Andrew Brenner has a previous history with Thomas. He wrote several magazine stories in the late 80s, some of which were adapted for season 3 episodes. He's a longtime fan of the series himself, and he understands what works and what doesn't work in Thomas. This man saved the show. He and his staff have faltered a bit in the early experimental years, of course, but they have finally figured out the perfect balance of pleasing the show's fans, the target audience, and the big suits at Mattel. Season 20 is a true testament of what he has done for this franchise. Andrew Brenner, if for any reason you are watching this video, please know that you in fact saved this franchise and made a lot of fans very happy. I don't necessarily love everything you've written, The Great Race, but I am eternally grateful for the show's transformation. If for any reason you could reach out to me, please do. I'm very interested in your thoughts on all this. I would love to hear your insight. Seriously, thank you for all that you've done. Number 9. Little things. I've now talked about all the big things in Season 20 I wanted to cover. There are a number of little things I want to mention, but didn't feel necessarily warranted their own individual section of the video. So I've compiled them all here. I need to talk about the music. This was the first season with music composed by Chris Renshaw. Our first major exposure to him was The Great Race, and while I don't like that movie much, the music was very great. And the music in Season 20 is no exception. I like this return to using exclusive themes for particular characters. My favorite, of course, was Daisy's. I also loved how the Smallies theme is renditions of Never Overlook a Little Engine. Should they ever appear again, I hope they continue to associate them with that song. The music also felt really experimental at times, which worked to certain episodes' advantages. That electric guitar music for the Pack episode was so suiting. Of course, the mouth-breathing Dukes of Hazzard redneck characters that are Max and Monty would be associated with music like this, and it was excellent. I have to mention the animation. The animation is stunning as always. ARC continually got better and better as the seasons went on, and they've struck a new peak with Season 20. There were so many sequences that were just brilliantly animated. The biggest one that comes to mind was Rex's crash. The animation has come such a long way now, and it's really made the early CGI stuff just unwatchable. I'm sorry, but Season 13 looks just awful now. Good at the time, yeah, but wow, it is such a visual contrast. Thomas has always been a show that very heavily was driven by its visuals and beautiful sets, and I'm glad to see ARC has taken full advantage of that, incorporating a variety of camera angles, locations, etc. I've also heard people say the facial animation is poorer this season, which I don't really get at all. If episodes like Pouty James or Cautious Connor showed us, the facial animation is nothing short of better than what we've had previously. Unfortunately, I'll have to say that Season 20 is ARC's final peak because the company went bankrupt in August of last year. They did go out with a bang though, and thankfully they were bought out by a company called Jamfilled, so not everyone there is out of a job. Jamfilled completed the final 5 episodes of Season 20, and will be animating Thomas from here on out. I personally didn't notice a difference in animation between ARC and Jamfilled, so I guess we don't have much to worry about as an audience. Last thing I want to mention is humor. Classic Thomas has always had comedic undertones, but making us laugh was never its intention. As we saw in Season 19, the writers are starting to incorporate a lot more humor into the show now. Some people didn't like it in Season 19. I personally thought it was fun. Season 20 I thought was even funnier than 19, and the humor was absolutely top-notch. There are a number of funny moments that stick out to me. The biggest of all was the Eye of the Tiger sequence in Over the Hill. I don't think I've ever laughed harder while watching a Thomas episode than that. Other gut-busting moments were Rex's crash, Sir Topham Hatt completely losing his mind on the beach, and the list just goes on. When a show aimed at kids manages to make a 23-year-old like myself genuinely laugh, they are doing something right. Well guys, that's just about it for this review. This is without a doubt the longest thoughts on video I have ever made, but god dang it, Season 20 was worth the hours spent on writing this script, recording, editing, and editing a second time. It's the least I could do to show just how much I appreciate and how grateful I am for this season. It's one of the best we've ever had, hands down. I cannot thank everyone involved enough for bringing Thomas up to an all-new peak. Before I go, I figured I'd rank my top 10 episodes from this season. My personal list goes Number 10, Henry Gets the Express. Number 9, Mike's Whistle. Number 8, Love Me Tender. Number 7, The Missing Breakdown Train. Number 6, Useful Railway. Number 5, Mucking About. Number 4, Skiff and the Mermaid. Number 3, Ryan and Daisy. Number 2, Over the Hill. And number 1, Tit for Tat. I feel bad ranking these because every episode this season deserves some sort of praise in some way. Thank you everyone for watching. This is the Unlucky Tug signing off. Have a great day, everyone.